Under the blistering sun of late August 1998, the Whitaker family, Henry, his wife Marlene, and their teenage son Danny, were making their way back to the family farm nestled in the rolling plains of western Kansas. Their old Chevy pickup rattled over the cracked asphalt, hauling a trailer filled with freshly harvested wheat sacks, the golden dust clinging stubbornly to every crevice. The radio crackled softly with classic country tunes, but an uneasy silence hung in the cab, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of a grasshopper from the open window. Henry glanced at the rearview mirror. At first, it was just a distant dot, an ancient, rusted truck that had appeared behind them somewhere near the county line. The truck's faded paint peeled like old bark, its windows tinted so dark they seemed like black holes. It kept pace, never gaining, never falling back. A strange feeling settled in Henry's gut, a creeping sense of being watched or followed. He shook his head and tried to dismiss it as paranoia born of too many late nights tending the fields alone. Marlene, fiddling nervously with the hem of her blouse, whispered, "Do you see that truck back there?" Henry nodded but said nothing. The truck had been trailing them for nearly 30 miles now, close enough to make out a misshapen silhouette of a man behind the wheel, hunched and shadowed by the cab's grimy glass. Danny, staring out at the endless wheat fields shimmering in the heat, caught sight of it too and frowned. "That old rig gives me the creeps," he muttered. As the highway narrowed near a forgotten crossroads, the truck suddenly surged forward, its engine growling to life with an unnatural fury. It roared past the Whitakers' pickup, veering sharply to pull in front of them and come to a grinding halt. Henry slammed on the brakes, the trailer swaying dangerously as the dust billowed around them. The truck's door creaked open, and a gaunt figure stepped onto the road. His face was obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat, the brim casting deep shadows over sunken eyes and a jagged scar that ran from cheekbone to jaw. He moved with a deliberate, unnerving calm, as if the very ground feared his steps. "You lost?" the man called out in a voice rough as gravel. Henry's heart pounded. There was no sign of anyone else. "We're just heading home," Henry replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Marlene grabbed Danny's arm, her knuckles white. The man smiled, a crooked, sinister grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Funny," he said. "Most folks don't come this way anymore. Especially not with what's waiting down the road." Without another word, he climbed back into his truck, slammed the door, and peeled off in a cloud of dust, disappearing over a rise. The Whitakers stared after him, a cold dread settling over their bones. That night, as they arrived at the farm's weather-beaten gate, Henry found something unusual: fresh tire tracks in the soft dirt beside the fence, tracks that led straight toward the abandoned barn at the far edge of the property. Henry had lived on this land since boyhood, had known every inch of it. Those tracks hadn't been made by their own vehicles. Something was wrong. The barn, which had sat empty since Henry's father passed years earlier, was shrouded in shadows. The scent of hay and earth was thick, but beneath it lurked a faint metallic odor, like rusted iron or old blood. Henry pulled open the creaking door, flashlight in hand. Inside, the beam cut through dust motes hanging like ghosts. The silence was oppressive. And then he saw it, a battered, leather-bound journal lying on the floorboards, half covered by a torn burlap sack. Its cover was cracked and worn, embossed with a faint emblem, a twisted wheat sheaf encircled by barbed wire. Henry hesitated before picking it up. The pages inside were yellowed, filled with cramped handwriting, dates spanning back nearly 20 years. The entries spoke of strange happenings, missing cattle, unexplained machinery failures, and veiled threats from an unknown source. One passage caught his eye: "The man with the scar watches. His shadow falls over the fields. He is not of this place, but he controls what grows here." A chill ran down Henry's spine. Who was this man? And what did he want with the Whitaker farm? Marlene wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, "We should call the sheriff." But Henry shook his head. "No. This isn't just some trespasser. There's something bigger going on, something they don't want us to find." That same night, a sudden crash shattered the quiet, metal twisted and splintered near the barn. Henry rushed outside to find one of their old tractors overturned, its engine still sputtering faintly. The rear axle was bent, and the fuel tank had been punctured, gasoline pooling on the ground. Whoever had done this wanted to send a message. The Whitakers were no longer safe. As Henry tended to the tractor under the fading moonlight, his thoughts drifted to his brother, Tom, who had disappeared without a trace 17 years ago while working these very fields. The loss had haunted the family ever since: Tom's abandoned pickup found rusting by the creek, his belongings gone, and no explanation for what had happened. Could this man with the scar be connected to Tom's fate? Determined to uncover the truth, Henry vowed to dig deeper, knowing the local sheriff's office was tangled up with interests that preferred the past buried. Over the coming days, Henry began combing through the journal's cryptic entries and inspecting the farm's perimeter. Neighbors were tight-lipped, some avoiding his gaze, others shaking their heads as if afraid to say more. The local diner owner, old Mrs. Collins, was one of the few who spoke freely. "Folks around here don't like stirring up old dust," she warned. The man with the scar, some say he's tied to the co-op, others whisper about a smuggling ring using the silos. Nobody's caught him, and no one dares cross him. Henry's investigation was soon met with overt hostility. His tools were sabotaged, fences cut to slow his movements, and one night, headlights swept across his windows, circling the farmhouse like vultures. Yet, amidst the menace, a glimmer of hope arrived in the form of Sam Jenkins, a retired agronomist who had worked with Henry's father decades before. Sam had studied soil composition and crop cycles in the area and noticed abnormalities in the irrigation canals near the Whitaker farm, chemical residues inconsistent with any approved pesticide. "Someone's poisoning the land," Sam said grimly. "And whoever it is, they want the Whitakers gone." As the tension escalated, Henry found a strange piece of farm equipment wedged behind the barn, a vintage Massey Ferguson cultivator, oddly out of place and bearing fresh scratches that didn't match its age. Beneath it lay a faded photograph of Tom, smiling beside a young woman Henry didn't recognize. Was she a clue to Tom's disappearance? One evening, as Henry stood by the field's edge watching the sunset bleed into dusk, a sudden noise startled him, a low growl, followed by footsteps crunching over dry corn stalks. The early September breeze swept across the Whitaker farm with a coolness that belied the tension thick in the air. Henry's eyes, rimmed with fatigue but burning with determination, scanned the horizon where the golden wheat fields bowed gently beneath the fading light. The journal had become his constant companion, each page revealing more questions than answers, and yet somehow weaving a tangled thread connecting the past with the present. The faded photograph tucked beneath the Massey Ferguson cultivator gnawed at him. The young woman beside Tom was a mystery, a puzzle piece missing from a decades-old jigsaw. Henry had shown it to Marlene and Danny, but even their memories came up blank. "Could be someone from town, maybe a friend," Danny guessed, though his voice was uncertain. Marlene shook her head slowly. "I don't recognize her, and if she was part of Tom's life, why'd no one mention her before?" Henry knew the answers wouldn't come easily. The past was buried deep, coated with dust and silence. His first stop was the old county records office, a squat brick building smelling of mildew and aging paper. The clerk, a wiry woman named Ruth, remembered the Whitaker family well, though she glanced nervously over her shoulder as Henry asked about any reports from 17 years ago, missing persons, unusual police activity, anything tied to Tom Whitaker's disappearance. "Records from that time are spotty," Ruth said carefully, flipping through yellowed files. "There was a missing report, sure, but it went cold quick. Nobody followed up much. They figured Tom left on his own." That casual dismissal cut like a knife. Henry left with copies of reports, police logs mentioning an anonymous tip about a suspicious truck spotted near the farm the night Tom vanished. That truck was described similarly to the one Henry had seen last month, the same battered rust bucket, the same haunting presence. A pattern was emerging. Back at the farm, Henry met with Sam Jenkins, the retired agronomist whose knowledge of the land was a rare beacon in the gathering gloom. Sam handed Henry a small jar filled with murky water and soil. "Tested this near the irrigation ditch last week. High levels of banned pesticides, something that could wreck crops and poison cattle." Henry frowned. "That explains the sudden drop in yield the last few years, but why target us?" Sam shrugged. "Maybe the land's worth more without a working farm on it. Could be someone's trying to push you out to grab the property." Their suspicions found a reluctant confirmation when Henry discovered a ledger hidden in the false bottom of an old toolbox in the barn. The ledger's pages detailed suspicious transactions, payments to unknown contractors, and references to silhouette operations and crop modifications that sounded like code. The entries spanned years, but one name appeared repeatedly, a local agribusiness magnate, Charles Redmond, who owned much of the farmland surrounding the Whitaker property and wielded influence like a steel trap. Henry recalled whispered warnings from Mrs. Collins at the diner about Redmond's ruthless tactics, buyouts, intimidation, and rumors of illegal smuggling through grain silos. Determined to press forward, Henry and Sam made a plan to test soil samples deeper on the property, especially near the irrigation canal that had been altered recently. That night, as Henry locked up the barn, a set of headlights flashed in the distance, then vanished. The feeling of being watched returned with a vengeance, cold and persistent. A week passed with mounting unease. Henry's old pickup broke down inexplicably on the side of the road, the engine dead despite his best efforts to fix it. Someone had tampered with the fuel line. Marlene urged him to stop, fearful for their safety, but Henry refused to back down. Memories of Tom's smile, the way he'd taught Henry to handle the Massey tractor, the sound of his laughter during county fairs, all fueled a fire that wouldn't be snuffed out. One afternoon, Henry visited the local diner again. Sitting in the corner booth was a man Henry didn't recognize, lean, sharp-eyed, wearing a faded denim jacket with the emblem of a now-defunct farm cooperative. The man introduced himself as Frank Calloway, a former farmhand who'd worked around the area decades ago. Frank was cautious but agreed to talk over black coffee. He spoke of strange shipments that arrived at the silos late at night, trucks that never registered with local authorities, and men who silenced questions with threats rather than answers. "That man with the scar, he's not just a local nut," Frank said quietly. "He runs those smuggling ops. Uses the farm as a front. If your brother got too close, that might have been the end of it." Henry's fists clenched around his mug. Why haven't the sheriff or state police done anything? Money and muscle. Redmond's pockets run deep. And folks around here, they're scared. That night, Henry dreamed of Tom, standing in a field of withered wheat, reaching out with a hand covered in dirt and bruises. His voice was a whisper carried on the wind, "Find the truth, Henry. Don't let it rot in silence." The next morning brought a breakthrough and a heartbreak. Marlene found an envelope tucked behind an old coat in the farmhouse closet. Inside was a letter, yellowed and fragile, penned in Tom's unmistakable handwriting. It told of fear, of threats to the family, and a plan to expose the corruption that was poisoning the land and ruining lives. Tom wrote that he'd stumbled on evidence tied to Redmond's illegal pesticide dumping and the smuggling ring using the farm silo network to transport unregistered chemicals and goods. He promised to return home once the truth was safe. But the letter ended abruptly. There was no final sign-off, only a cryptic line, "If anything happens to me, look where the river bends." Henry's heart pounded as he realized the river bend was just beyond the northern field, near a grove of ancient cottonwoods. Gathering his resolve, Henry and Sam ventured out to the bend, flashlight and shovel in hand, the journal and letter safely tucked inside Henry's jacket. They searched for hours in the thick underbrush and soft soil, the setting sun turning the sky a bruised purple. At last, Henry's shovel struck something solid. They uncovered a rusted metal box, sealed tight with years of dirt and roots. Inside were photographs, documents, and a small revolver. Among the papers were detailed notes Tom had kept, names, dates, and codes linked to the smuggling operation and pesticide dumping. There was also a faded map showing a hidden entrance to an underground silo connected to the farm's main grain storage. This was the linchpin of the entire scheme. But before they could absorb the weight of the discovery, a sudden noise froze them, the crack of a branch under heavy boots. Emerging from the shadows was the man with the scar, flanked by two burly figures. "I told you, Whitaker," he snarled, "this land belongs to me now. You're trespassing on things you don't understand." Henry stepped forward, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "I understand enough to know you're poisoning this place and threatening my family. It ends now." The man laughed darkly. "You and what army?" The night exploded into chaos. Henry and Sam dodged as the burly men lunged forward, using the tangled trees for cover. A desperate scuffle ensued, Henry's hand gripping the revolver tightly, though he hated violence. The fight was brutal and brief, the attackers retreated into the darkness with threats echoing. The morning sun spilled pale gold across the wheat fields, casting long shadows from the swaying stalks that whispered secrets in the breeze. Henry Whitaker, his hands still dusty from the underground silo, felt the weight of every discovery pressing heavier on his shoulders. The leather gloves marked TW lay folded on the kitchen table beside the scattered pages of shipping logs and coded letters. Marlene watched him from the doorway, worry etched deep in her lined face, while Danny sat stiffly at the counter, clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee. The silence was thick, a fragile tension that neither dared to break until Henry finally spoke. "We're closer than ever to what happened to Tom. But it ain't just about the past anymore. Redmond's still running this operation, poisoning our land, threatening anyone who gets in his way." Marlene nodded, eyes glistening. "We need help, Henry. More than just us and a few neighbors." Henry's gaze drifted toward the cracked window overlooking their fields, where the distant grain elevators stood like silent sentinels. The man with the scar was still out there, lurking in the shadows, and Redmond's influence seeped into every corner of the county. He'd already seen how deep the corruption ran, local officials turning blind eyes, old friends wary of speaking too freely. That afternoon, Henry drove into the nearby town, the weight of his mission etched into the lines on his face. The general store buzzed with midday chatter, farmers and townsfolk gathered around worn wooden tables sipping coffee, sharing news both mundane and urgent. Henry approached Sheriff Daniels cautiously. The sheriff was a gruff man, more comfortable with paperwork than confrontation, his tan hat pulled low over eyes that had seen too much to be surprised. "Sheriff, I found evidence, documents, poisoned soil samples, a hidden smuggling ring beneath the farm," Henry said, lowering his voice. "Tom's disappearance, the threats, it all ties back to Redmond and his crew." Daniels shifted uneasily. "Henry, you know Redmond's a powerful man round here. He's got friends in high places. Without solid proof, it's a risky move." Henry met his gaze steadily. "I've got the proof in that underground silo, in those shipping logs. I need your help to bring this to light." The sheriff hesitated, then sighed. "I'll look into it, but don't expect miracles. Politics and money run this county." Back at the farm, Henry gathered his allies, Frank Calloway, the former farmhand with insider knowledge, Sam Jenkins, the agronomist, and a handful of trusted neighbors who'd been burned by Redmond's schemes before. Together, they mapped out a plan to gather more evidence, to document the illegal pesticide dumping and track the smuggling routes. As September gave way to October, the landscape shifted from gold to burnt amber, the harvest season winding down amid an uneasy calm. Henry's investigation unearthed disturbing clues, altered soil chemistry leading to livestock illnesses, suspicious shipments arriving under the cover of darkness, and whispered warnings from frightened workers. One night, as Henry inspected the irrigation canal with Sam, they discovered fresh tire tracks leading toward a narrow service road rarely used except by Redmond's trucks. Hidden beneath a pile of discarded machinery, they found crates labeled with foreign markings, the same as those in the underground silo. The evidence was mounting, but so were the dangers. Henry's pickup was found vandalized again, this time with shattered windows and slashed tires. A menacing note was left on the windshield: "Stop digging or disappear like your brother." Fear and determination warred within Henry. Memories flooded back, of Tom's easy smile, the late nights working the harvest, the county fairs where Tom had won ribbons for his prize-winning steer. Those memories fueled Henry's resolve, even as threats became more frequent. One evening, Frank confided over coffee, "There's talk of Redmond hiring toughs to intimidate folks. I've seen men lurking near the barns, watching us like hawks." The community's silence was a shield, and breaking it would come with a price. Then came the red herring that nearly derailed the entire investigation. A local man named Gus Miller, a grizzled ex-farmhand with a shadowy past, was arrested for breaking into the Whitaker barn. He claimed to be searching for something, an old journal he'd hidden years before. But his erratic behavior and contradictory stories cast suspicion on him. Some believed Gus was involved in Tom's disappearance, others that he was a pawn in a larger game. Henry and his allies were forced to tread carefully, knowing the wrong accusation could fracture their fragile coalition. Meanwhile, Marlene uncovered a stash of letters in the attic, correspondence between Tom and a woman named Evelyn, the same woman in the faded photograph. Their letters spoke of plans to expose Redmond's illegal dealings and escape the county together. But the letters ended abruptly, hinting at betrayal and fear. The discovery added a new layer of complexity. Was Evelyn involved? Was she still alive? Did she hold the key to the mystery? Driven by this lead, Henry sought out Evelyn's last known address in a nearby town. The house was abandoned, overgrown with wild vines and weeds. A faded FFA jacket lay discarded in the yard, its patches worn but still vibrant. Inside, Henry found a hastily scrawled diary, detailing Evelyn's attempts to gather evidence and warning of threats from unknown enemies. The final entry spoke of a planned meeting with Tom near the river bend, a rendezvous that never happened. As Henry pieced together these clues, a sense of foreboding grew. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became that Tom's disappearance was tied to a conspiracy far more extensive than he'd imagined, one that stretched beyond local land disputes into the shadowy realms of organized crime and corporate greed. One chilling night, Henry awoke to the sound of footsteps crunching gravel outside the farmhouse. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the porch's cold light, heart pounding. A figure stood near the edge of the field, silhouetted against the moonlit wheat. It was Evelyn. Thin and weary, her eyes held the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much. "Henry," she whispered, voice trembling. "I've been hiding, afraid for my life. But I know where Tom is. And why they took him." Over the coming days, Evelyn revealed a grim tale of deception, threats, and secret dealings within Redmond's empire. Tom and she had uncovered a clandestine operation, illegal shipments of toxic pesticides and chemicals smuggled through the grain silos, designed to sabotage smaller farms and force sales to Redmond's company. Tom's plan to expose the operation had made him a target. Evelyn herself had narrowly escaped a violent attack and had been living in the shadows ever since. Their reunion was bittersweet, a mix of hope and sorrow. But the danger was far from over. Redmond's men were closing in, and time was running out. As October faded to November, Henry organized a bold move, an attempt to capture irrefutable evidence by setting hidden cameras at key points in the smuggling network and documenting the illegal activities. The community began to stir, whispers of resistance growing louder. Yet the threats escalated. Marlene found her barn door slashed, and Danny was followed one night after returning from the town's grain elevator. Henry's resolve hardened into steel. The final puzzle piece emerged unexpectedly when Sam analyzed a soil sample from the northern field. The brittle chill of November seeped into the Whitaker farmhouse as Henry sat poring over the grainy images captured by the hidden cameras at the silo complex. Each frame was a piece of a dark puzzle, revealing the steady stream of trucks unloading crates marked with foreign labels and hazardous warnings, confirming the smuggling operation they'd long suspected. The flicker of the television screen illuminated Henry's weathered face, etched with exhaustion and resolve. Beside him, Evelyn flipped through the worn pages of Tom's journal, her eyes haunted but sharp. Outside, the land lay quiet, fields barren now, the last of the harvest long in, but beneath that quiet, an uneasy tension pulsed. The farm was no longer just a place of memories and toil, it had become a battleground for truth and justice. Henry's mind raced, knowing that the evidence they had could topple the corrupt empire Redmond had built, yet also aware that those forces would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Marlene entered the room, bringing with her the scent of fresh coffee and the soft sounds of the wind rattling the window panes. "You need rest," she said gently, placing a hand on Henry's shoulder. "We all do." But Henry shook his head. "Not yet. We're close. Too close to turn back now." The next morning, Henry and Evelyn met with Sheriff Daniels again, this time armed with the undeniable proof from the cameras and the documents found in the silo. Daniels studied the footage with a furrowed brow, the weight of responsibility settling heavily upon him. "This is serious," he admitted. "I'll need backup and a warrant to move in. Redmond's influence runs deep, but we can't let fear stop us." Word spread cautiously among the small circle of allies, Frank, Sam, and a handful of trusted farmers who had quietly rallied to Henry's cause. The county was on edge, old loyalties strained as the reality of the corruption settled like a storm cloud. Henry remembered the county fairs of his youth, the laughter and music, the pride in hard work, and how those simple joys seemed so far away now. Yet, within those memories lay the heart of his fight, to reclaim the land's dignity and honor his brother's legacy. Over the following days, preparations for the raid began in secret. Henry's farm became a hub of quiet activity, maps spread across tables, radios crackling with tentative plans, and a collective hope tempered by the fear of betrayal. Henry kept a wary eye on every visitor, knowing Redmond's men could be anywhere, watching, waiting. One afternoon, Sam returned from the field with alarming news. The soil tests showed increased contamination near the irrigation canal, far worse than before. "If this keeps up, the entire county's water supply could be at risk," Sam warned gravely. "We need to act fast." That night, as the wind howled outside and the wheat stalks whispered their mournful song, Henry sat alone on the porch, the night's darkness a cloak around him. His thoughts wandered to Tom, to the laughter they once shared, and to the last letter that had led him here. A sudden crackle of the radio startled him, Frank's voice, urgent and low. "Henry, they're onto us. I saw a convoy of trucks heading your way, and it ain't friendly." Adrenaline surged. Henry grabbed his coat and stepped into the cold night, heart pounding as headlights pierced the darkness. The silhouette of the man with the scar appeared again, standing tall and menacing by the old barn. His presence was a grim reminder that the final battle was near. Henry's breath steamed in the air as he confronted the shadowy figure. "This ends now. You won't get away with this." The man's smile was cruel. "You've stirred the hornet's nest, Whitaker. Redmond's not just a man, he's the whole damn county. You're fighting ghosts." Before Henry could respond, the sound of engines roaring filled the air. A convoy of trucks, heavy with guards and armed men, rolled onto the property, intent clear in their cold, hard eyes. Henry and his allies scrambled to hide the evidence and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. What followed was a night of chaos, a desperate struggle amid the farm's fields and buildings. Henry fought with everything he had, old farming skills and quick wits his only weapons against overwhelming odds. The scent of gasoline and dust filled the air as fires flared and gunshots echoed across the prairie. Amid the fray, Marlene and Danny were rushed to safety by neighbors who had come to stand with the Whitakers, their courage a quiet testament to the strength of community. In the turmoil, Henry managed to slip away to the grain silo, determined to secure the last piece of evidence, the shipping logs and Tom's journal, vital to exposing the entire operation. The narrow stairs creaked beneath his weight as he ascended into the darkened chamber, heart hammering. There, in the flickering glow of his flashlight, he found a hidden compartment, its door slightly ajar. Inside were crates filled with the illegal chemicals, alongside detailed ledgers chronicling years of smuggling, bribery, and land theft. Suddenly, the man with the scar appeared behind him, blocking the exit. The confrontation was tense and brutal, words exchanged like blows, the past and present colliding in a fierce battle of wills. Henry's grip tightened on the journal, his voice steady despite the danger. "This ends tonight. You'll answer for your crimes." The scarred man laughed bitterly. "You think this county will ever let go of me? I'm the soil, the grain, the blood beneath your feet." But before the standoff could escalate, the wail of sirens pierced the night. The sheriff's backup had arrived, tipped off by the allies who refused to stand down. The man with the scar snarled but retreated into the shadows as officers swarmed the silo, securing evidence and arresting those involved. In the aftermath, dawn broke over a battered but unbroken farm. Henry stood on the porch, watching as deputies loaded crates of illegal chemicals and led prisoners away. The land seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the wheat fields shimmering anew under the soft light. Marlene joined him, her hand finding his. "We did it," she said softly. "For Tom, for us, for the future." Henry nodded, eyes misty. The road ahead would still be hard, rebuilding trust, healing wounds, restoring the soil, but the darkness that had hung over the Whitaker farm was lifting. The community, once silenced by fear, was beginning to speak out, reclaiming their voices and their land. As Henry looked to the horizon, memories of Tom and the family they'd lost mingled with hope. The past had been unearthed, its secrets revealed, and justice was taking root in the soil they loved. The story of the Whitaker farm was far from over, but for the first time in 2 decades, it was a story of resilience, courage, and the enduring strength of family. ChatGPT. The cold bite of early December settled over the Whitaker farm as frost glazed the brittle stalks of wheat, casting a silvery sheen that sparkled in the weak winter sun. The events of the past weeks weighed heavily on Henry, yet the sense of victory was tempered by the knowledge that the true battle was only just beginning. The arrests and seizures had disrupted Redmond's operation, but the man himself remained elusive, a ghost slipping through the cracks of law and influence. Henry sat at the kitchen table, poring over the thick binders of evidence collected from the silo and the farm, the worn leather journal of his brother Tom resting beside the stacks of photographs, reports, and confessions. Marlene brewed coffee in the background, the comforting aroma a small balm against the storm of thoughts swirling in Henry's mind. Danny, now old enough to understand more than he let on, sat nearby, his expression somber yet resolute. The community's support had grown, neighbors coming forward to testify, sharing stories of intimidation and losses they'd borne silently for years. Henry realized that beyond just his family's story, this was about restoring justice and dignity to an entire rural county ravaged by greed and corruption. Yet the question remained, where was Redmond hiding? And what secrets had he taken with him into the shadows? One bitter morning, Henry received a call from Sheriff Daniels. The voice on the other end was grave but determined. "Henry, we've got leads on Redmond. His trail's cold, but a tip put him near an old cattle ranch about 100 miles west. It's abandoned, or so they say. I'm sending a team to check it out." Hope flickered. Henry and Evelyn, who had by now become an indispensable partner in the search, decided to join the investigation. The journey west was long, the landscape gradually shifting from wheat fields to sprawling cattle ranches framed by rolling hills and skeletal trees dusted with frost. The old ranch was a sprawling estate, its wooden fences broken and sagging, barns dilapidated, and the air heavy with the scent of dry hay and neglect. As they approached, Henry's keen eyes noted signs of recent activity, fresh tire tracks in the mud, a faint glow of light through the cracks in one of the barns. The place was far from deserted. Moving cautiously, the group split up to search. Henry's heart pounded as he entered the largest barn, the scent of oil and dust thick in the air. Inside, crates stacked high bore labels similar to those from the silo, illegal pesticides, smuggling goods, and, most disturbingly, a collection of documents and photographs pinned on a makeshift board. Among the photographs was one that stopped Henry cold, Tom Whitaker, hands bound, face bruised but defiant, standing in the very barn where Henry now stood. A cold fury rose in Henry's chest. This was more than just smuggling, it was a prison, a hidden hell where Tom had been held. Evelyn's voice called out from the corner, trembling. She'd found a journal, its pages chronicling Redmond's escalating cruelty and plans to expand the smuggling ring into neighboring counties, corrupting officials, and intimidating farmers into silence. The journal spoke of a secret meeting scheduled weeks ago, one that Tom had been forced to attend, a deal gone wrong that had led to his disappearance. As they sifted through the evidence, a sudden noise shattered the tense quiet, a door slamming, footsteps pounding on the creaking wooden floor. Redmond himself stepped into the dim light, flanked by two burly men. His presence was imposing, a mixture of charm and menace. "Well, well, Whitaker," he said smoothly, eyes glinting with malice. "I see you've found my little sanctuary. You're persistent, I'll give you that." Henry squared his shoulders, refusing to show fear. "It's over, Redmond. The county knows what you've done. It's time to pay." Redmond laughed, a dark, bitter sound. "You don't know the game you're playing. I've buried men for less." Suddenly, one of Redmond's men lunged at Henry, but Evelyn reacted swiftly, throwing a heavy metal rod that struck the attacker squarely, sending him crashing into the barn wall. Chaos erupted. Henry fought with the desperation of a man protecting his family's legacy, fists and determination his only weapons. In the midst of the melee, Henry caught a glimpse of a side door, his chance to call for help. He dashed outside, heart pounding as he fumbled with his cell phone, only to find the battery dead. Panic surged. Evelyn followed, her breath ragged but steady. Together, they raced to the edge of the property, where a narrow dirt road wound through the trees. Just as Redmond's men regrouped and gave chase, the wail of sirens pierced the frosty air. Sheriff Daniels and his deputies arrived in force, blocking the escape routes and surrounding the barn. Redmond's smug facade cracked, his confidence fading as he was handcuffed and led away. Henry watched, chest heaving, as the man who had haunted his family's past was finally brought to justice. But even in that moment of victory, a nagging doubt lingered. Where was Tom? And was he truly free? The following days brought a wave of relief and sorrow. Authorities uncovered hidden rooms beneath the barn, makeshift cells where other victims had been held captive, their stories untold until now. The county rallied, offering support and healing to those who had suffered under Redmond's reign. But Tom Whitaker's fate remained a mystery. Then, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source. A local fisherman reported finding a battered pickup truck submerged near the river bend, the very place Tom had mentioned in his letter all those years ago. The vehicle was identified as Tom's. Inside, along with personal belongings and documents, was a note, scrawled hastily but unmistakably in Tom's handwriting. It spoke of an escape attempt, betrayal, and a final act of defiance before being taken by unknown forces. Henry felt a crushing mixture of grief and hope. Tom had fought until the end, and though the answers were incomplete, a chapter was finally closing. Marlene held Henry's hand as they stood by the riverbank, the winter sun casting long shadows over the frozen water. "He's with the land now," she whispered. "And so are we." The Whitaker farm, scarred but unyielding, stood as a testament to resilience and the enduring spirit of those who call the earth home. Justice had been served, secrets unveiled, and a community awakened from its fearful silence. But the journey had changed Henry forever. He knew that beneath the calm surface of rural life, shadows still lingered, waiting to be challenged by those brave enough to seek the truth. As the first snowflakes began to drift, settling softly on the fields and rooftops, Henry felt a quiet resolve. The story of the Whitaker family was not just one of loss and struggle, but of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his land. And that story, like the seasons, would continue to turn. The bitter wind swept across the Whitaker farm in the fading light of a late December afternoon, dusting the fields with the first tentative snowflakes of winter, each one melting quickly into the cold earth beneath the cracked boots of Henry Whitaker. The long months of investigation, danger, and heartache had culminated in a fragile peace, a victory earned through sacrifice and unwavering resolve, but Henry knew better than to think the story was fully told. The land beneath his feet held secrets still waiting to be unearthed, and the ghosts of the past had not yet fully released their grip. The farmhouse stood quiet, its weathered frame glowing softly in the amber light of the setting sun, smoke curling lazily from the chimney into the gray sky. Inside, Henry gathered with Marlene, Danny, Evelyn, and a few trusted neighbors who had stood with him through the darkest of times. Their faces bore the marks of hardship but also the warmth of shared purpose. The county had changed. The corrupt grip of Charles Redmond and his shadow empire had been shattered, yet the echoes of his reign lingered in whispered fears and tentative hope. Henry held in his hands the final piece of evidence, a small, battered leather-bound notebook that had been recovered from beneath the floorboards in Redmond's abandoned ranch. Its pages were filled with coded entries, ledgers, and maps detailing not only the smuggling operations but also a series of names, dates, and locations that implicated a wider network, one that reached far beyond their rural county. As Henry flipped through the fragile pages, memories flooded back, Tom's bravery, the sacrifices made, and the long years of silence that had weighed on the family like an unrelenting winter. The notebook spoke of meetings in distant cities, of corrupt officials who took bribes to look the other way, and of promises made in smoky back rooms. But amid the cold hard facts, there were also moments of humanity, a coded message of hope, a reference to a secret safe house where Tom had planned to send crucial documents, and a faded photograph of Tom standing beside a mysterious figure who now seemed central to unraveling the conspiracy. Henry's gaze lingered on the photograph, searching for clues, when Evelyn's voice broke the silence. "This is it, Henry. The key to finally bringing everything to light." Outside, the night deepened, and the first stars began to pierce the winter sky like distant promises. Together, Henry and Evelyn planned their next steps, knowing that the fight for justice extended beyond their county's borders. They would need allies, legal teams, and the courage to face powerful forces determined to bury the truth forever. Meanwhile, Marlene and Danny busied themselves with restoring the farm, their hands steady despite the weight of the past. The farm, once a place of fear and mystery, was becoming a symbol of resilience and renewal. The winter snows began to settle in earnest, cloaking the fields in white, muffling the world in quiet reflection. Henry often wandered outside, feeling the cold bite on his cheeks and the grounding presence of the land beneath his feet. It was here, among the snowdrifts and skeletal trees, that he found solace and strength. One evening, as Henry returned from a walk near the river bend, the place where so much had been lost and found, he noticed a solitary figure waiting by the edge of the woods. It was Sheriff Daniels, his breath visible in the cold air, eyes bright with a mixture of weariness and determination. "Henry," the sheriff said quietly, "we've made arrests in other counties based on the evidence you helped uncover. The network is unraveling." Relief washed over Henry, tempered by the knowledge that the journey was far from over. "Good," Henry replied. "But it's the beginning, not the end." In the days that followed, Henry received letters and phone calls from farmers and officials across the state, inspired by his relentless pursuit of truth. Communities once silenced by fear found their voices, standing against corruption and greed. The county fair, held in late summer, took on new meaning as a celebration not just of agriculture but of justice and community spirit. Henry, standing beside Marlene and Danny, watched as old friends and neighbors gathered, laughter mingling with the familiar sounds of livestock and carnival rides. Memories of Tom filled his heart, not just the loss but the legacy of courage and hope he had left behind. Yet, amidst the celebrations, Henry knew the land still held its mysteries. Late one night, as snow fell softly against the windows, Henry returned to the barn, drawn by a restless feeling. There, beneath a loose floorboard, he found a small wooden box. Inside lay a faded photograph of Tom, Marlene, and Danny taken decades ago, a carved walking stick with intricate patterns, and a folded note in Tom's handwriting. The note read simply, "For those who carry the land in their hearts, keep the faith." Henry's eyes misted. He understood then that the fight for justice was not just about uncovering dark secrets but about honoring the past and nurturing the future. The Whitaker farm, scarred but unbroken, was a testament to resilience, family, and the enduring bond between people and the earth. As the winter deepened, Henry felt a quiet peace settle over him. The story that began with fear and disappearance had blossomed into a legacy of hope and renewal. The land would heal, the community would thrive, and the memory of Tom Whitaker would live on in every furrowed field and whispering wheat stalk. The harvest of truth had finally come, and with it, the promise of new beginnings.